What's it called? No, I don't think I've ever heard that one. It's a lot warmer than I thought it'd be. Are you hot? Okay. Whatever you want to do. You're the pianist. You do what you want anyway. You're the boss. Are you ready? It's been doing this weird thing. There we go. Everything looks like it's connected, but then it says nothing is going, nothing is transmitting. Even though everything's green, and so anyway, it did it this morning, but okay. You ready? Just gonna wait till the end of this verse. This is why I like doing. I need to get my hymns on here that I used to have. All right, it's stopping. Thank you for being back here with us this afternoon at Grace Baptist Church. If you'll take your hymnals, turn to number 399. 399, Jesus, I my cross have taken, is the song we will open with here in just a moment after we've had a word of prayer. You thought we were out of the heat, didn't you? But boy, it feels brutal out there today. We've been spoiled. It's been cooler, and now it's just, what is it, mid-80s, and now it's just, it feels like we're dying. No, it warmed back up. Where is he? You'll find him. You tried to find him? He's over there somewhere. We have the biggest church in Indiana, if crickets counted. Number 399, Jesus, I my cross have taken. We're going to pray, and then we'll begin. Father, I pray that you can just help us to have a warm, pleasing, Lord, a meaningful time here together as a family. I pray that you can bless our efforts in worship and in the reading of your word, that it can have a transformative effect on us today. I do pray that you will, Lord, just help us to, Lord, help us to not be distracted or to be thrown off by what we see going on around us, by the downward trend of humanity. Help us to not look at that and give up or to slow down. I pray that we would be detached in a positive way, that we would detach ourselves from the affairs of this life, and that instead we would focus on being the best we can be for you, that we can focus on becoming like Jesus Christ, no matter what is happening around us, that we would not fall into the trap of looking at others and judging ourselves based on what we see around us, but that we would judge ourselves, that we would hold ourselves to the standard that we see in your word, that we would always be striving to live up to that standard. I pray that you would help us to have not just the focus to see progress in our own lives, but that we would seek, that we would work to help others make steps in their lives as well, that if we can help them and in any way push them a little farther down that path, however minute, however minuscule, I pray that you would help us, because that's what we're here to do. I pray that we would look for those opportunities, that we would be serious about those opportunities, that we would look at others with the eyes of Jesus Christ as lost sheep, and that we would feel compassion for them. I pray these things in your name. Amen. We're going to sing number 399, Jesus, I my cross have taken. We're going to sing all three verses. On the first. Jesus, I my cross have taken, all to leave and follow thee, destitute, despised, forsaken, thou from hence my all shalt be. Perish every fond ambition, all I've sought and hoped and known, yet how rich is my condition, God and heaven are still my own. Let the world despise and leave me, they have left my Savior too. Human hearts and looks deceive me, thou art not like men untrue. And while thou shalt smile upon me, God of wisdom, love, and might, foes may haste and friends may shun me, show thy face and all is bright. On the last. Hasten on from grace to glory, armed by faith and winged by prayer, heaven's eternal days before me, God's own hand shall guide me there. Soon shall close my earthly mission, swift shall pass my pilgrim days, hope shall change to glad fruition, faith to sight and prayer to praise. If you'll turn back to number 160, we've taken the cross, and it's because of the love we have for Jesus Christ. Number 160, my Jesus, I love thee. We'll sing all 4 verses of this song also. My Jesus, I love thee. I know thou art mine, number 160. On the first. My Jesus, I love thee. I know thou art mine. For thee all the follies of sin I resign. My gracious Redeemer, my Savior art thou. If ever I love thee, my Jesus, 'tis now. I love thee because thou hast first loved me and purchased my pardon on Calvary's tree. I love thee for wearing the thorns on thy brow. If ever I love thee, my Jesus, 'tis now. We're on the third. I'll love thee in life, I will love thee in death, and praise thee as long as thou lendest me breath, and say when the death dew lies cold on my brow, if ever I love thee, my Jesus, 'tis now. On the last. In mansions of glory and endless delight, I'll ever adore thee in heaven so bright. I'll sing with the glittering crown on my brow. If ever I love thee, my Jesus, 'tis now. Then for our final song, if you'll turn to number 485. 485, Sunlight in My Soul, we'll sing momentarily. I would like to present another nation where there is persecution that we should be praying for. This is a nation that has a lot of struggles, period. Not just in the realm of faith and religion, but it is the Democratic Republic of the Congo, formerly known as Zaire. Right, that was Zaire. Yes, I'm pretty sure. Democratic Republic of the Congo is over 110 million people. It's the 14th largest country in the world, one of the largest countries in Africa, not just population-wise, but also geographically. It's a very, very large nation there in southern Africa and south central Africa there. And in an interesting twist, the population of the Congo is 90% Christian, or at least they profess, 90% profess to be some denomination of Christian. And so there is a very, very small minority of Islamic believers that are there, but the Islamists that are there are extremely radicalized, and there are over 100 different armed militant groups that follow Islam that are having a very, what's the word? Not unbalanced, but they are very, very much projecting. Even though they're very small, they're projecting in a very powerful way in a very asymmetric way. They're having a very huge influence there, not in the northern part of the country. It's actually in the eastern regions of the Congo, where these pockets of Islamists live and where they practice and where they are trying to take over territory there. And even though, so we have this very, very large nation, very predominantly Christian, but so the persecution as far as, and we've seen this with some other nations, as far as like quantity and the idea of just volume, it's not very big compared to other nations, but when you look at what does happen there, it is very, very violent. And they are very much into the kidnappings and the beheadings and the burning down of the churches and things of that nature. There's, in fact, there was one province there I was reading, they went from something like 50 churches down to, they have one church left because all the others have just been destroyed and the people have been forced out. So very, at least in those areas, very extreme violence and persecution that they face. There are people there who are still trying to work around that and try to hide and try to work in secret and get the gospel there. They do have Bibles there. The Bible has been translated into Swahili, and they do have, because the rest of the country is Christian, it's very easy to get Bibles, but then it's getting them to those people in those affected areas that they have to be very, very careful. And then another challenge is, even you'd say, well, if the nation has, if it's that much populated by Christian people, wouldn't the people have a problem with this? And they do. The people do have a problem with it, but the government has been extremely resistant to do anything about it because there's very, very high levels of corruption in their government. And it's one of those situations where if I'm not getting paid to do this by somebody, if I'm not getting bribed to do this by somebody, then why would I care? Why would I worry about it? And so there is a lot of pressure on the government there to make changes, but unfortunately they're not doing a very good job. So we need to pray for those who are facing this extreme violence in the Congo. Most of the country lives in freedom, and there's churches and they can practice, but in that small pocket there in the east, it's very, very dangerous. So we need to pray for them. Let's go ahead and sing our final song, Sunlight in My Soul. We're going to sing all three verses of number 485, Sunlight in My Soul. On the first. I wandered in the shades of night till Jesus came to me, and with the sunlight of his love bid all my darkness flee. Sunlight, sunlight in my soul today. Sunlight, sunlight all along the way. Since the Savior found me, took away my sin, I have had the sunlight of his love within. Though clouds may gather in the sky and billows round me roll, however dark the clouds may be, I've sunlight in my soul. Sunlight, sunlight in my soul today. Sunlight, sunlight all along the way. Since the Savior found me, took away my sin, I have had the sunlight of his love within. On the last. Soon I shall see him as he is, the light that came to me. Behold the brightness of his face throughout eternity. Sunlight, sunlight in my soul today. Sunlight, sunlight all along the way. Since the Savior found me, took away my sin, I have had the sunlight of his love within. All right, good song to end on. Sunlight in my soul. If you'll take your Bibles, we're back to Joshua in the afternoons. So go ahead, turn back to Joshua. Joshua chapter 5. Joshua chapter 5 this afternoon. Joshua chapter 5, picking up pretty much where we left off last Sunday. We start. Remember, we are continuing the narrative that began with the children of Israel failing to enter the promised land all the way back in the book of Numbers. That's kind of what kicked this off, and so we followed the narrative of the children of Israel through Numbers and some things that God, over the course of 40 years, I'm sure a lot happened, but God only relays a choice selection of those episodes to us, and so there must be a reason for that. So we've been trying to look at those and see what is it that we can learn from those stories, from those events in that in that period of the wandering in the wilderness. But now we're here. Now they get to the end of Numbers. They have gone through a lot of the preliminary steps that God wanted them to. Probably the most important of which was the defeat of the Amorites there on the eastern side of Jordan. What was left of some of the Amorites from long ago. At that point, they were not near as widespread and as strong as they had been, but they were still an influential racial, ethnic, cultural group, and especially on that eastern side of Jordan. And so God had always said, one of these days I'm going to bring my people back, and we are part of that is to exact judgment on the Amorites for their heathen faith, for the fact, I believe personally, although the scripture doesn't say this. Oh, you got him? Good deal. All right. I hope that cricket was saved. But really going all the way back to, I believe, the flood. And I believe, when they got off the boat at the flood, you had Noah, you had his children. And of course, we know Noah found grace in the eyes of God. His family was there with him. And so they knew, they watched it all firsthand, and they were the only ones left. At that point, when they got off the boat, we had a 100% rating as far as the people who believed in God and were on our side, and it just went downhill from there, right? And so I believe that's what you see over the course of several centuries as you make your way to the time of Abraham, is people who were getting away as time took them farther from the flood. You had people who started twisting and convoluting who God was and what he had done and what had been said. And this is me personally, I believe that's where you see a lot of the embryonic elements to heathen faiths that seem to echo certain things in our own faith. You see in the Mesopotamian area, in that Middle Eastern area, there were different systems of belief, but they did share a lot of similarities, even in not just in the Middle East, but even going into the Far East. Things like the flood myth and the creation myth, and just certain characters, certain cues that we see that a lot of these religions, they all still seem to have these certain ingredients. And I believe that's what was happening. From the time of Noah to the time of Abraham, it was people were populating, they were spreading, and as they did that, many of them got away from Jehovah, and they started putting their own spin on things. And then that's where you see God come in. I believe personally, Job, they are pretty sure Job is the oldest book that was written, if you're going by the chronology of when, I almost said pen touched paper, but when chisel touched stone, I guess in that case. And it was God correcting mankind about their perspective of him. And the key idea in Job is the idea of God's sovereignty. And then we move on then to him choosing his people, choosing Abraham and the descendants of Abraham to be this vessel, if you will, to carry the truths of God for mankind, but then also, more importantly, to prepare the perfect scenario in which he would then send Jesus Christ to die on the cross, and then and then rise from the grave. And here's the thing I think people don't think about. It's not just that it was leading up to that point. It's that God, I believe this with all my heart, God picked the Jewish culture and the Jewish people to be his vessel, not just to get them to Christ, but because he knew he was planning on what would happen after Christ and on those disciples and on those apostles who would then carry the truth of Christ to the rest of the known European Western world at that time. And so all of that we see set up, and the Amorites fell away from that truth. And now God is saying, okay, it's time for me to bring my people back. It's time for them to be punished. We get there. I'm going to give you the promised land. I'm going to set all this up so that I can bring about the Messiah in a couple thousand years, several centuries. And they get there, and folks, it's like those videos. You ever seen these where the one that's just burned into my mind, I'll never forget. It's this guy on a bicycle, and he's pedaling, and he's coming up on the finish line, and he's getting right to the finish line. And as he does, he knows he's going to win. And so he sits back, takes his hands off the handlebars, pumps his fists, and he's coasting. And from out of nowhere, here comes this guy on his bike, and he is tucked down, and his head is just as tight down by the handlebars as it can be, and he's just pumping for everything with everything he's got. And right at the last second, he comes screaming by this guy who is, premature celebration there, and so he loses the race, right? This other guy comes across, but the worst part is the guy coming past him startles him so much, and he watches as this guy takes the victory out of his hands. I mean, we're talking literally like 3 or 4 yards is all the farther he had to go. And because of being startled so much by this other cyclist, he doesn't have his hands on the handlebars, remember? He topples and he crashes right there. Doesn't make it across the line. And I just think, every time I think about the children of Israel coming to the promise, that's the picture in my mind is they're there. Yay! We're there! We're going to do it. And then here comes doubt, which is what it was. Doubt comes and knocks them down right there. And God says, that's it. That's it, you guys. I have had it with you carrying on like this for several years now, ever since we left Egypt, 1 to 2 years somewhere in there, maybe 3, by the time they get to Sinai and get everything set up and then get on their way. He says, I've had it. And so he punishes them 40 years in the wilderness. But now we've come to Joshua. Now it's time. And he says, be strong and of a good courage. It's time to go in. It's time to finish the job. And so our last message we looked at from Joshua chapter 3 and Joshua chapter 4, which really, I didn't want to read both chapters, but that's all one complete thing, those 2 chapters. And they come to the Jordan River, the literal line, right? The literal barrier. And God parts it for them in a grand display of his power and of the continuity, right? What a great display of continuity. God says, I am still your God. I will still move these barriers out of the way, these impassable barriers. I will flick them out of the way as if they were nothing, and you will walk in as if it was the easiest thing you've ever done, right? And they come in to the promised land. God does that great miracle there. They bring stones with them. They build a monument so they can remember this day, remember this event. This was an important event, and we looked at that with the perspective of what are lessons that we can learn in our own lives when it comes to those benchmarks, those milestone moments. There are things that we need to look for. There are attitudes we need to have. There are actions we need to take if we want to see those moments. And then what we should do when we see those moments, there's a right perspective to have. And so now we're going to look at Joshua chapter 5, and this is a follow-up to last week's message, but it does bring a new, distinct angle to it. We're still talking about making our way down that path that God has for us, right? That's what's happening. They're finishing the job. They're finishing the mission to go in to conquer and to take possession of the life that God had for them. And we see parallels to that in our own lives. We see those moments where there's that benchmark. But now I want you to think about it in this way. What happens once we're across that line? You say, well, they got to fight. They got to fight the battles. They got to fight this campaign. And that's true. And we're going to get to that. But here, Joshua chapter 5 is a little bit of hang on, stop for just a second. We want to give you a couple details kind of chapter. And I want to look at what this chapter says and share some thoughts with you about that development process. We've crossed the line, okay? We had that huge, momentous occasion. But now, as we're getting ready to start the campaign, there's a couple ideas we need to keep in mind about continuing down that path. Joshua chapter 5, let's begin reading. We're going to read the whole chapter. It's not a long chapter. We're going to begin reading in verse 1. It says, and it came to pass, when all the kings of the Amorites, there's still some Amorites. Remember, I believe this was a catch-all term. Kings of the Amorites, which were on the side of Jordan westward, and all the kings of the Canaanites, which were by the sea. I believe that if that is, remember, Canaanites was also a generic term for people who were in Canaan, but in this instance, it's being specific. They were by the sea. This would be the Phoenician culture. The Phoenicians were a seafaring culture. They did not have land. They had ports. They dwelt in ports all around the Mediterranean, and they were the ones who gave us it was the proto-alphabet. That's where we get our modern system of writing from. It's from the Phoenicians. That's who it's talking about here. So the Amorites, the Canaanites, which were by the sea, when they heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of Jordan from before the children of Israel, until we were passed over, that their heart melted, neither was their spirit in them anymore because of the children of Israel. At that time, the Lord said, personally, I think that verse should have been the last chapter. That's just me. I believe this is where this chapter should have started. At that time, the Lord said unto Joshua, make thee sharp knives, and circumcise again the children of Israel the second time. And Joshua made him sharp knives and circumcised the children of Israel at the hill of the foreskins. And this is the cause why Joshua did circumcise. All the people that came out of Egypt that were males, even all the men of war, died in the wilderness by the way after they came out of Egypt. Now all the people that came out were circumcised. All the people that came out of Egypt is what it's saying, were circumcised. But all the people that were born in the wilderness by the way as they came forth out of Egypt, them they had not circumcised. For the children of Israel walked 40 years in the wilderness till all the people that were men of war, which came out of Egypt, were consumed, because they obeyed not the voice of the Lord, unto whom the Lord sware that he would not show them the land, which the Lord sware unto their fathers, that he would give us, a land that floweth with milk and honey. And their children, it's talking about God, whom God raised up in their stead. He's saying he raised up these children in the stead of their parents, right? Instead of them, it's going to be the children that are now going to enter the promised land. It says, and their children whom he raised up in their stead, them Joshua circumcised, for they were uncircumcised, because they had not circumcised them by the way. And it came to pass, when they had done circumcising all the people, that they abode in their places in the camp till they were whole. And the Lord said unto Joshua, this day have I rolled away the reproach of Egypt from off you. Wherefore the name of the place is called Gilgal unto this day. Gilgal is the rolling. And verse 10. And the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at even in the plains of Jericho. And they did eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes and parched corn in the selfsame day. And the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. And it came to pass, when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him and said unto him, Art thou for us, or for our adversaries? And he said, Nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and did worship, and said unto him, What saith my Lord unto his servant? And the captain of the Lord's host said unto Joshua, Loose thy shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy. And Joshua did so. We see, again, read the first verse of the next chapter. Now, Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, none came in. So, we've crossed the line. Okay? And the next big step is Jericho. Chapter 6, verse 1. But here we have chapter 5 tucked in here with a few it would seem, not major things that are happening. These are just a few minor, almost administrative kind of things that are happening. But I find in this passage I think there's a theme here that we see. We've just gotten done with this major milestone. And milestones are good. Milestones are fun. Milestones are they're important, right? And we celebrate that. Birthday rolls around. We're getting ready here in just a couple few weeks. We're going to celebrate my oldest son's birthday. He's going to be 14 years old. 14. It's a big deal. These birthdays are a big deal, right? We celebrate, we'll decorate. That's one thing my wife really likes to just go all out is on birthdays, right? We do the big decorations and big party. Always have the cousins come over, and they'll try to burn as much energy as they possibly can, and yet somehow they still never get through all of it. But a lot of fun, and it's fun. We do that. We have good food. We see family. We see friends. Kids get to play. And that's great. But it's not like that happens, and then it's okay. Now everything goes back to the way it was. Because if that was the case, where would the development happen with our children? Where would the development happen in our lives? If we celebrated a milestone, but then we just went back to being the way we were before the milestone, right? It would be kind of dumb if my child turns 16 and he goes to gets his driver's license, and then once he gets his driver's license, he says, "Okay, I got my license," and then he never drives. What's the point of that? And so there are these milestones, but the milestones have to mean something. They have to. They are part of that development process. And so when those milestones happen, with those milestones now comes an update, a lot of times, depending on the situation, to who and what we are. And I'll explain more a little bit about what I mean as we get into this, but the illustration I really want to focus on is this. And that's one I just used not that long ago because I was talking about our youngest son. Our youngest son now is riding a bike, a regular bike, right? And he used no training wheels on his bike. And I think did I tell you folks about, yes, balance bike. Now this bike, it just doesn't have pedals. They learned to scoot around on that. And so he learned how to balance, and then when we put him on a real bike, all he had to do was worry about pedaling, and so he took right off, and he's biking. But that's a new thing. For decades, the process of learning how to ride a bike was you put them on a small bike that has training wheels, right? And they are the ones who are steering. They are the ones who are pedaling. It is in the shape of a bicycle. I mean, it's a bike. It's made of steel frame, and probably if you're buying an aluminum frame bike for your toddler, that's Jeff Bezos right there. Do they even make the designer bikes, real high quality bikes for toddlers? I don't know. I'm sure somebody does. But it's probably just a regular old steel tube frame bicycle. It's got regular pedals, got regular chains, regular handlebars. Everything's just minified, right? Unembiggened for smaller people, for smallish people. But I mean, it is a bike. That's what it is. And they power it, and they steer it, and they control it, and they can ride on the pavement just like someone with a regular bike. But they need those training wheels. They have not developed to the point yet where they can handle that bike without the training wheels. They have not learned the motor skills. They have not developed the sense of balance. They have not developed the reflexes sometimes necessary to manipulate that bike underneath them without those aids. And here we have the children of Israel crossing the line. They've had this milestone now, but now we see in this chapter there's some changes that are happening. There's some updating that's going on. And just as we do this with our children, where our children reach a milestone, maybe it's an age. We say, okay, you are now X years old. The training wheels are coming off. You have reached this height or this weight. I'm not going to have somebody drive by and see my child that's 5 foot tall riding around on a bike with training wheels. You're too big, right? You're too big. The training wheels are coming off. And whatever it is, whatever the moment is, it reaches a point where it's time. It's time to remove these aids. It's time to step up, to mature, to develop, to continue to develop the way you should be. And that's what I see in this passage. I think this is a biblical version of God taking off the training wheels. And so I want to look at this passage today. And I know there's a lot of setup, but I just have 3 very simple thoughts here. When we, in our own lives, have those milestone events like we looked at with crossing the Jordan, one of the ideas we need to keep in mind with that is there may be an update as far as where, what is expected of us. God says, okay, you've reached this point. Now, I'm going to push you out there a little bit on your own. You're going to have to grow up a little bit. You're going to have to start carrying some more weight. You're going to have to start figuring some of these things out on your own. I'm going to push you out of the nest a little bit, right? We have I've shared with you, we have our robin's nest that is perennially used right outside our front door. And we watch every season as normally we go through 2 cycles. I don't know if it's the same mother bird both cycles, but we get to see at least 2 birth cycles. Robin will be in there. She'll normally have 3 or 4 eggs, and we'll see them hatching. It's a perfect setup so that we get to see the whole thing from start to finish. And they're very well protected under there, and they're very safe. It's just there's nothing can get to them up there. And so we get to watch that whole thing play out. And it gets to the point where those baby birds are just crammed into that nest, right? Like sardines. And so eventually the mama bird has to say, all right. And she has to push them out. And then you see a little young robin, a robinette, a robinlet. I'm not sure what they call a young robin. A poult, isn't that what they call a young bird, a poult? And it's down there bouncing around on the driveway. And we get to see that. Of course, now we have a cat and we're worried, oh boy, the cat's going to get them all. But those moments come where I got to push you out of the nest. It's time for you to start doing some of these things for yourself. And that's what I think we see happening here in Joshua chapter 5. No more training wheels. No more training wheels. 3 ideas we need to remember when we are in these moments. When we have milestones, we've realized something, God has shown us something, we've made a decision, we've made a step, and God says, that's great, you are maturing, that's wonderful. Guess what? There's some new things you've got to worry about. There's some new things we need to take care of here, moving forward. The first point we need to make here, when the training wheels come off, it may be painful, right? When training wheels come off, it may be painful. With our first 3 children did not have the luxury of the balance bike. They had the training wheel model, and the training wheels come off, and my wife would take them out here to the parking lot and then take them over to the hills over here. We got these real shallow hills, right? That's real easy. You know, they're very, very low, very broad, and so just nice, gentle incline, and she could take them up to the, not the top, but the top makes it sound like they're these mountains, the apex, okay? And they can roll down, and if anything happens, they're in the grass, right? And they can fall off. And so she tries to teach them on the grass as much as possible, but you can only do that for so long. At some point, they've got to be on a hard surface. And if there's one thing we know about children and hard surfaces, it's this: you can't keep them apart. They will come in contact with each other at some point. And let me tell you something, folks, it doesn't end with just because you're not a child anymore. Apparently, even when you're an adult, you still come in contact with the hard ground at times. Want to know how I know? Want to know how some of us know, right? Happens to the best of us. And when those falls happen, you ever fallen off your bike? You ever fallen on your bike? Right? I don't know if you folks know this. I fell on my bike. I think I've told this up here. I got a rock in my hand. Right? I hope my mother never listens to this. I've still got that rock in my hand, Mom. I've got a piece of gravel shoved into the palm of my hand here, right here. It's been there for at least, I'm going to guesstimate 26 years at minimum, maybe a little bit longer. It's been there for 26 years. I've had this stone in my hand. And let me tell you something, folks. When you fall on your bike hard enough to embed rock into your hand, that's so much that it stays there for 26 years, it was not pleasant. It hurt. And here the children of Israel, they've entered the promised land. God says, okay, we need to take care of something before we go any farther. What's that? Time to circumcise. Now, I want to be very delicate here. I don't want to be gross. I don't want to be inappropriate. You folks are all familiar with what circumcision is. It's a painful thing. You say, well, why? Why did they wait so long? I don't know. Nobody knows. There's been some debate on this, why they did not circumcise the children as they had them, like they were supposed to, like they had normally done, as God had prescribed. I believe there was a reason for it. I don't know exactly what the reason is. I have a guess. I'm not going to talk about that right now. It doesn't matter. But whatever the reason was, they had not been circumcised, and so now they've come, they've crossed the barrier, they've reached this milestone. It's time to start conquering the promised land. But before we do, we have this one little, we have this one thing we need to take care of. Part of being God's people means that you are circumcised. And so if we're going to do this, if I'm going to be your people, or if I'm going to be your God, you're going to be my people, you need to all be circumcised. So they go through this. All the males that were younger than 40 years old, all at once. We're talking hundreds of thousands of people. And I'm sure that was a painful experience. This pain, by the way, couple ideas here. Pain, first of all, may be remedial. The pain may be remedial. This may be a corrective measure. Here, God is going back and correcting something. This is something that all of them were supposed to do, and so now we're here, and it's like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to go back and fix this. You've had to remediate. So maybe it's education. Maybe it is something medical, right? You've had to go back. These people, sometimes they get their bones broke, right? Someone will break an arm, and it doesn't set right. And so years later, they got to go back, and the doctor has to re-break the bone and then set it properly. I've never had that happen, but I get the distinct impression that is not pleasant. I would not want to go through that. Having to go through pain to fix things, right? I did, one of the things I did do as a young person, I had to wear braces for 3 years. Let me tell you something about braces, folks. Not fun, painful. You ever gotten hit in the face with a basketball while you're wearing braces, right? It's not pleasant. I was on the ball team, and so, you get smacked or whatever. You're just playing, and you're playing the game, but boy, you get hit, right? Then the braces come off. And for 3 of my formative years, I was growing a lot during that period. For 3 of my formative years, I had these big hunks of metal in my mouth. Guess what happened when all that came out? My lips were as loose as, right? And so you cannot imagine how many times I bit my lip or bit my cheek because my mouth was not used to all of that extra space in there. It hurt. But it had to be done to correct something that didn't go right. Proverbs 20, verse 30, the blueness of a wound cleanseth away evil. So do stripes the inward parts of the belly. The blueness of the wound cleanseth away evil. Sometimes we've got to go through a little pain to fix something. It's God's way, just like in our body, it's our body's way of being fixed. Just same thing with God. Sometimes God, we have these milestones, and God says, okay, I'm glad you're here, but before we go any farther, we need to correct this. You have the wrong idea about this, or you engage in this wrong activity. And now that you're here, that's not acceptable anymore. That bad habit you can't do anymore. When you're riding your bike with the training wheels, you get into the bad habit of you kind of rely on them training wheels, don't you? You lean. You're going to lean to the side, lean to that side. And training wheels come off, and you go to lean, and mom and dad has to say, look, you can't do that no more. You've got to correct that bad habit. Pain may be remedial, but also pain may be rough. This wasn't just pain, folks. This was rough. Okay? Look at, what does it say there in we read in verse 2? Make these sharp knives. Joshua made him sharp knives. Whew. Hey, Joshua, what you doing? Oh, I'm just making these knives. Oh, yeah? What you making them knives for? Well, I got some good news and I got some bad news. Oh, I imagine that was excruciating. This wasn't going to get your shot, right? I just went and get a shot not that long ago. You got to do it. It pricks at you a little bit. It's like, maybe you have a little bit of aching there. And it's good. You need to do that. That's not what was happening here. This was surgery, folks. And by the way, they didn't have anesthesia like they had today. When the training wheels come off, when we've reached a milestone, God says, it's time to move forward. But before we move forward, we need to make some changes. One of those things may be we've got to go back and correct some things, and it's going to hurt a little bit. It might cause you some pain, some trauma. Second idea, verses 10 through 12. Children of Israel encamped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at even in the plains of Jericho. And they did eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes and parched corn in the selfsame day. And the manna ceased on the morrow after that they had eaten of the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more. But they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. I want you to think about this. Put yourself in their shoes. Nehemiah talks about this. Let me read this. Nehemiah chapter 9. This is Nehemiah, I think this is Ezra. This is Ezra speaking. And he's going back and just reviewing what God had done for the children of Israel. He says, Thou gavest also thy good spirit to instruct them, and withheldest not thy manna from their mouth, and gavest them water for their thirst. Yea, 40 years didst thou sustain them in the wilderness, so that they lacked nothing. Their clothes waxed not old, and their feet swelled not. We see Ezra there, or not Ezra. Yes, Ezra. That's what I said. Did I say Ezekiel? No, Ezra. I'm talking about Ezra. Ezra there talks about how God provided for them for 40 years. He made sure they had manna every day to eat. He made sure they had water to drink. He made sure their clothes and their shoes never wore out. Because, think about it, they didn't have time to stop and to engage in the agricultural endeavors that were necessary to maintain those types of things. Back then, they couldn't just be out there wandering the wilderness and get on the Amazon app and say, hey, FedEx, bring me a new cloak, right, out here in the wilderness. They didn't work that way. If you wanted clothes, you had to make them yourself. Well, they were wandering. They couldn't stop and set up shop and then go through those processes of being able to manufacture those things for themselves. So God miraculously provided for them and kept their clothes in good condition. Ha! Take that! My wife doesn't like that I keep my t-shirts for so long. God let them keep their clothes for 40 years. See, it's biblical. We see God takes care of them in this way. And think about this. Think about every day. I'm not even 40 years old yet. Every day for 40 years, you go outside and there's breakfast. You never have to think about it. You never have to worry about it. Like clockwork, it's there every day. And now they wake up one day, it's gone. And it never comes back. And of course, I know the whole point of this is they're in the promised land. They have access now to the agriculture there. They're going to eat the crops that the heathen nations there had planted. And then, of course, then they'll take over the agriculture themselves once they finish their campaign. I know that. They know that. You can't tell me, though, that there wasn't just a little bit of nervousness there. And so we see not only will it be painful, but when it comes to taking the training wheels off, sometimes it may be precarious. Training wheels come off, and what happens? The little kids out there riding the bike, what are they doing that whole time they're riding that bike without the training wheels? What are they doing? Every 2 seconds, what are they doing? Why? Why are they doing that? They want to know if mommy or daddy is still behind them holding onto that bike seat, don't they? They're checking. You still back there? Don't let go. Don't let go, right? Don't let go. And imagine that. Imagine going and going and going and going for 40 years. And then all of a sudden you look back there and whee! You are on your own in this area now. I have to believe. I'm not saying they doubted God as far as like, oh no, there's no more manna. God is forsaking us. I'm not saying that. But I do have to believe that in their humanity, there had to be some level of, I hope this works out okay, right? It may be precarious. Matthew. Remember Matthew chapter 14. Peter on the water. Lord, if it be thou, bid me come out on the water with thee. He gets out there, and what happens? He sees the waves boisterous, right, and the wind and all of that, and he starts to sink, right? He gets out there. Milestone event. Training wheels all of a sudden, because that's, talk about a training wheels coming off kind of moment. Jesus is like, hey, yeah, come on out here. Come on out here, bud. Training wheels are coming off. Get out of the boat. And he steps out there, and he does okay for a minute, but then he gets distracted by everything he sees around him, and he starts to sink. And I know we give Peter a hard time, but I can't say I wouldn't have done the same thing. I'd have probably been a little nervous out there too. Oh, in the middle of the night, in the middle of a storm on a giant body of water. Right? No, there's no Coast Guard. There was no Coast Guard there. It wasn't like they could radio in to Capernaum and be like, we got a man, out here lost at sea. We need you guys to bring the chopper out. No, there was no lights out there, right? They were just out there, maybe moonlight. I mean, I'm assuming they saw enough to be able to see Jesus. So I'm sure there's some light, but man, I don't think I'd have passed that test either. sometimes when the training wheels come off, it's a little tense, a little touchy, a little iffy. It may be painful. I gotta finish because I'm way past time. It may be painful. It may be precarious. Number 3, let's read our last 3 verses here. Verse 13. Came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho. What does that mean? I don't know. I don't know exactly how close he is to Jericho. I don't know how far he is away from the encampment. I don't know exactly where this happens. I don't know if, the common assumption here is that they've crossed the barrier, the Jordan, into the promised land. They set up camp, and now this is Joshua going near to Jericho to kind of scope it out. That's always been the general understanding of this. Is that what's happening? I don't know. I think that's a logical conclusion. But for whatever reason, he's near Jericho. It says he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him. Like, wait, what? Guy's got a sword. You're going to walk up right to him? I guess Joshua, maybe, again, just Occam's razor here. Maybe he's thinking, this is a guy who might be an enemy. If he's an enemy, I need to go and take care of him before he can give me away. Maybe that's what he's thinking. Joshua went unto him and said unto him, Art thou for us or for our adversaries? And he said, Nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. Joshua fell on his face to the earth, said unto him, What saith my Lord unto his servant? We believe this is possibly one of the few times that we see a representation of Christ in his pre-incarnate form. We don't know that 100% for sure. The Bible doesn't explicitly state that. But the way it frames it, I think that there's validity to that. If nothing else, the fact that he refers to him as Lord and he refers to himself as his servant. And the captain of the Lord's host said unto Joshua, Loose thy shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy. And Joshua did so. Here we see Joshua having his own burning bush moment, right? We see that story with Moses. Moses been wandering on the backside of the desert for 40 years. A lot of wandering for 40 years. Boy, that desert got a lot of use, didn't it? And so he sees the burning bush. He goes up. God says, the place where I'm going to stand is holy ground. He's getting ready to call Moses. This is a big deal. And now here we see this echoed in this moment. They've crossed the line. They're in this they've reached this new level. This is happening now. They're at a new stage. God says the training wheels are coming off. You're going to get circumcised. You're going to get back up to speed. I'm taking away the manna from you. And of course, they're getting, they know this. They know they're going to have to fight, right? They knew that going into it. They knew there was going to be a battle. But here, Christ appears to Joshua and he says, I'm here as captain of the Lord's hosts. In other words, this is God, possibly Jesus, coming to Joshua and saying, it's time, it's time for us to fight. And he says, and this is where it gets serious, Joshua. It's for real now. He says, I'm actively getting involved in this now. I'm coming to you as a military leader. And we are going to do this. This is the big show, right? This is what they're there to do. Before this, had they fought? Yeah, they had fought. They had won victories. They fought at Rephidim. They fought the Amalekites at Rephidim. We see where they went and took out the Midianites, right? And then of course we see, most importantly, the battles against Sihon and Og, and they win those, and God gives them the victory. But those were very few and far between battles. God used, God miraculously gave them the victory in these cases. But now we come to this, and I don't know, to me, this seems like a tonal shift in what is happening. It's like Jesus is saying, I am here personally to oversee the campaign because this is the real deal now. This is what we're here to do. And so we see when the training wheels come off, sometimes that means it may be a perspective thing. It may be progressive. It's time to update how you're thinking about this. It's time to update how, your sense of what you are, what is expected of you. Think about someone who's riding their bike. Training wheels come off. Okay, now you don't have training wheels on. You're a big boy. You're a big girl. You're riding now. Now you've got to be careful. Now you've got to watch out for cars. You've got to watch out for siblings, right? That's our big one. We got to make sure the siblings don't run over each other, right? You can't run. Now you don't have training wheels. You can go a lot farther, a lot faster. There's limits now we need to set. You can't go past the stop sign down there, or you can't go past Mrs. Jones's fence. And so now here's your child. Before they were just a cute little kid, puttering around in your driveway with their little training wheels. Now they can go places. Now they're older. They've reached this milestone, and so now things have to get more serious, don't they? Kid grows up and gets their driver's license, right? You say, Dad, I've been driving a go-kart. Dad, I've ridden my bike. Dad, I've driven golf carts before. Dad, I know how to do a four-wheeler. Yeah, you know how to do some of those things, and there's similarities. It's a vehicle with four wheels going, that works under its own power, and it has a seat, and it has doors, maybe it has a steering wheel, and you turn, and you know how to manipulate that, you know how to control that, and there may be a lot of similarities, but we're talking about a 3,000-pound death machine now that involves, high explosive material and all kinds of laws and much higher speeds, and much more is at stake now. And so you have to adjust your perspective, right? You sit down with your child and you're like, you've got to be careful now. You've got to think about these things now, right? Before, he's just riding around on his training wheels. He didn't have to worry about this stuff. Now it's like, no, now you've got to worry about this stuff. That's part of getting older. That's part of developing. That's part of being at new levels. Is you've got new responsibilities. You've got new things you've got to look out for. And I think that's what's happening here is Joshua sees this, theanthropic expression of Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ is saying, I'm here as captain of the Lord's host. The battle is getting ready to start, Joshua. It's time to step up. It's time to progress here, update your thinking. This is it. You guys are here now. It's no more conjecture. It's no more I hope or I wish we get there. It's happening now, and it's going to be a long, nasty, hard battle. Up till now, you fought 2 kings. We've got 31 kings here for you to fight, right? And they are a lot more consolidated. They are a lot more unified in certain instances. I think there's one point where there was 12 of them, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 12 of the kings that banded together. This is going to be a lot tougher, a lot more vicious of a campaign. Hebrews chapter 5 says, For everyone that useth milk is unskillful in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But strong meat belongeth to them that are of full age, even those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. Paul there, I believe Paul, the writer of Hebrews there is basically saying, he says, look, there's some people, they're not spiritually mature enough to handle certain things. And he says, but the people who are spiritually mature, they better be careful. They got to know what they're on about. They've got to be diligent and responsible with the word. 1 Peter 4, For as much then as Christ hath suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. For he that suffered in the flesh hath ceased from sin, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh to the lusts of men, but to the will of God. There, again, in Peter, he's talking about you have been saved. Now you're suffering for Christ. He says part of that, that's a milestone. Suffering for Christ is a benchmark in your life. It means you are serious to a certain degree. It means that this is real to you to a certain degree. All right? That means that you actually believe this. But he says, but that's not the end. He says, that's the beginning. He says, now, because you've gone through this, now you need to update your mindset. You need to be ready for what's coming. Training wheels coming off means a higher degree of responsibility. It means an update to how we think about things before we go any farther. When I bought my kids, I'll end with this. I bought my first son his knife, his first pocket knife. And I was so excited. And so we went and we picked it out at the store, and we were coming home. And I said, now, I want to tell you some things about having a knife. I said, there's 3 rules. There's 3 rules about carrying a knife around with you. He said, okay. I said, the first rule is be careful. He says, okay. I said, now, the second rule is be careful. He goes, okay. And I said, third rule, any guesses? He goes, I can remember, he's sitting over in the front seat of the car. He looks at me, he goes, be careful. I said, yes, you got it right. You got to be careful. You've got this tool now. Is it great that he has the tool? Yeah, he's old enough. Now he's got access to this tool. This tool opens up things he can do with it. But it's something he's also got to be careful with. That's what I think is happening here. No more training wheels, folks. We talked last week about reaching these new levels. Reaching these new levels might mean we have to make some of these adjustment type things in our life, or God has to make some of these adjustments in our lives. All we're saying today is look out for these things. Be ready for these things. You might be in a situation where God is saying, I want you to do X. And you're like, okay, God, I'll do X. But if I do X, that means I'm going to be kind of putting myself out. I'm going to be exposing myself to some kind of risk. And God says, yeah. And you say, okay. It's time to get out there. No more training wheels. God says, I personally, I'm going through this right now. God's working in my life about something, and I'm looking at it, and part of it is God saying, you need to do this, you need to take this step, but part of taking this step is you need to go back and fix a couple things over in this area. And I'm like, but I don't want to. Because if I do, I'm not going to like it. It's going to be unpleasant. And God says, guess what? That's part of moving forward. Maybe it's time for you. Maybe it's time for us. Maybe we need to update something about what we think. We need to be ready for that. We just had a discussion a couple nights ago about people who are not ready to discuss the truth and to accept the truth and move forward. They want to stay where it's comfortable. They want to stay in that comfort zone. They want to stay where it's warm and fuzzy and I like this. Your kid, folks, you can't have your 15-year-old kid climbing into bed with you at 3 a.m. You just can't. When they're 3 years old, okay. But when they're 15, it's time. It's time to step up. You got to kick them out. And of course, hopefully it's not got that long, but whenever that time comes when you do deal with it, they're not going to like it, are they? They don't enjoy that process. And you have to say, look, you're too old for this now. You can't be doing this. And so when you talk about them with it, they may not like that. But you have to explain to them, look, there's more serious things at stake now. I'm going to end there because if I don't, I'll just keep on going. It may be painful. It may be precarious. It may be progressive, but sometime the training wheels have to come off. And of course, all of that sounds negative, but in the reality of it, the training wheels coming off is ultimately a good thing, isn't it? That's actually where you want to go. Your child getting their driver's license is a good thing. It opens up so much for them. Us maturing is a good thing. Reaching these milestones is a good thing. And these safety mechanisms that we get so reliant upon, sometimes those coming off is a good thing. Mother bird kicking her baby out of the nest. The baby will never learn to fly if she doesn't kick it out of the nest. It will never be able to grow up to an adult bird and to propagate the species and to do its job. So I know it sounds like these might be negative, but in the big picture, these are actually positive things. They might not be enjoyable at the time. So no more training wheels. Just be ready for these things in your own lives as you reach milestones in your life, as God pushes you to grow. Just recognize you might have to go through some of these experiences as well. So let's be prepared to ride without those training wheels today.